Hi everyone, my name is Scott Shell. If you want to go ahead and check out my credentials, please go to scottshell.net. It has a list of all of my degrees, courses taught, education, and papers published in conferences and whatnot. So today I'm going to go ahead and talk about something that kind of bugs me sometimes, and that's the pronunciation of the Elder Futhark rune names. So I've been in many situations where I hear someone say a rune name, and I'm like, what did you say? Oh, I said Othala. Othala? What is Othala? Oh, you mean Othila. Oh, okay. That sort of thing. And I'm not trying to be a jackass or anything. It's just that it literally just doesn't register with me because the accent in proto-germanic is always on the first syllable. Let me say that again. The accent is always on the first syllable. I mean, I digress, but I say that so many times, and for some reason, so for example, it is not like the word content, but rather content, right? So it's always going to be on the first syllable, or technically the first root in that word. So whatever. For our purposes here, it's going to be on the first syllable. So let's go ahead and start with the first rune. The first one is going to be ferro. Ferro. So if I say that quickly, it's just ferro. Notice I didn't say fehu. So that's a very common mistake. I mean, I even make that mistake all the time too, because in certain groups, in certain contexts, people just say, oh yeah, the three fehu runes or something like that. But technically, again, if you want the correct pronunciation in Proto-Germanic times, specifically late Proto-Germanic, it would just be fehu. So that's actually a short E, as you would hear in the word entrance or explode, elk, those words. It's fehu. The next one is going to be urus. Urus. Now this is if you reconstruct ur from the Old English rune poem and you want to reconstruct the word for aurochs, in which case is, again, urus. Urus. Not a very problematic one, so let's go ahead and move on to the next. So this one is going to be thorisas. Thorisas. So it's not thorisas, thorisas, something like that. It's actually kind of a short I. I mean, we're getting into pedantic territory here, but, just roughly thorisas. Thorisas. So that's also how we get Thors or Thoris or Doris in Old High German. That I is actually short. Ansus. Ansus is the next one. Not ansus, but rather ansus. It's that back A. Ansus. And then we have, this is actually another one where people pronounce this as raido. Raido, I think. That actually makes absolutely no sense linguistically. It's raido. 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 Again, raido. And the reason why it doesn't make any sense is because that sound, the th sound, is retained in Old Norse. So like wraith, right? But in English, it's modern ride. So in Proto-Germanic, the eth sound becomes a D in the West Germanic languages. So again, Proto-Germanic, raido, not raido. Doesn't make any sense. The next one is kenas. Kenas. That's, of course, again, if you are reconstructing this Proto-Germanic name based on Old English chain. Chain, not cane, it's actually chain. If you want to reconstruct kaunan, that comes from the Scandinavian tradition. So we'll just say that this rune has two names. One is kenas, and then the other one is kaunan. Kenas, kaunan. So the next one we have is rebel. Rebel. Sounds very different from gable, right? So again, that E is actually a short E. In the earliest times, that G was not pronounced like gable, or gable, but rather it was more of a fricative, like rebel. But again, if you want to just pronounce it a little bit like a hard G, that just means that it's going to be in a little bit later Proto-Germanic times. The next one is wunyo. Wunyo. Pretty easy. The next one is hagalas. Hagalas. So it's not hagalas, hagalas, but rather hagalas, hagalas. So you have that bit of an i-umlaut sound that you have in modern German. And so sometimes you'll see it written with an X, for example. If you look into like proto-Germanic words and you see someone reconstruct the word, the rune name rather, for hagel, sometimes you'll see them reconstruct it with an X. The only reason that is because people are trying to tell you, typically they're linguists if they're trying to reconstruct it with an X, they're telling you that it's that i-umlaut sound. So hagalas. But again, later Proto-Germanic, hagalas, hagalas, no i-umlaut sound. The next one is nowadies, nowadies. So again, it's not nowadies, nowadies, nowadies. Because again, that eth goes to a hard D in the West Germanic languages. So think about it, like I said, with raido, right? So in Old Norse, you have nauð, right? Or nöið in modern Icelandic. So you see that it still has that eth sound. So what is it in English? Need, right? So in Proto-Germanic, it's not a D like nowdies, it's nowthese, nowthese, nowthese. The next one, very simple, Isa or Isan, depending on how you want to actually reconstruct it, but it's just Isan. The next one is also pretty easy. It's just Yera, Yera. That one's easy, but now comes the problematic rune that everyone's probably here for. So I wish I could give you, just like any other linguist out there, I wish I could give you like, this is how this rune was pronounced 100% for sure. I, however, do believe that this rune was pronounced as an ash, and that follows along the lines of Elmer Antonsen, who says that this rune name that you're seeing right here on the screen is Ahwaz. Ahwaz. So not not a, but apple, right? Ahwaz, Ahwaz. So the reason this is problematic is because in Old English inscriptions, for example, you'll see that this rune represents an I, but we already have an I rune, right? That's Isa. Furthermore, this rune could even represent a consonant in Old English, like a consonantal H. So it's like, well, this is kind of strange. It represents a consonant here, represents this vowel sound over here, and then you get this, mostly the Scandinavians coming along saying, well, it's got to be a sound between the sound E and A. So in other words, orthographically, a sound between I and E. There are no sounds there between I and E, other than just the lax sounds, but that, in other words, lax long E is just eh, and lax long A is just eh. So what I'm trying to get at is that there's no real vowel there that should be represented by this, what I'm calling the ash rune. So I digress. This is a very short video. I don't want to get into too many details because it's meant for just, the layman. And then we have perthro. Perthro. Pretty common pronunciation. I mean, people don't usually mispronounce that one. Then we have elhaz. 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 So you have that i-umlaut sound yet again for H. Sometimes you'll also see this reconstructed as alges. Alges. Those are two different reconstructions, but that's how you say both of them. Finally, we have soilo. Soilo. Pretty common too. Again, it's not soilo, but soilo. Soilo. Finally, we have tiwaz. No problems there. Then we have berkano. Typically no problem there either. So then we have another one that's a little controversial. This is going to be ehwaz. Ehwaz. Not ehwaz. Ehwaz. So it's going to be a short E again, as in like exit or entrance, entry. Ehwaz. Ehwaz. It is not ehwaz. Sometimes it gets mixed up with that because in the runic system, it can represent that sound later in the runic system, really like post-Proto-Germanic. And so people might have thought, oh, okay, it was ehwaz or something like that. But no, it actually could just represent and a. But the pronunciation is just ehwaz. Then we have manaz. No problem there, really. Then we have lagus. Again, no problem. After lagus, we have ingwaz. Ingwaz. And of course, we have Dagas, in which case is a very easy one. Nobody usually screws that one up either. So just simply dagas, dagas, dagas. And then we have finally one of the more problematic ones, orthila or orthala. Whichever one you prefer, just make sure the accent's on the first syllable. I prefer orthila just because it can then account for i-umlaut in like Old English. But that's my preference for that reconstruction. Both reconstructions are pretty common. So again, orthila or orthala. One last thing I can say about that last word too is that in the earliest of proto-Germanic times, that would have technically been pronounced orthila, orthila. And then later, getting closer to like runic times, it would be orthila, orthila. So doesn't really matter. I mean, it's close enough for most of the people who are interested in these videos. But basically, the earlier one would have been something like that coffee sound, right? So orthila, because later on it only became long O as in orthila. All right, so let's go ahead and do a very quick recap. I'm just going to say all the names of the runes without any commentary. Go ahead and say them with me. Fehu, Orus, Thorisas, Ansus, Raido, Kenas, Rebo, Wunyo, Hagalas, Naudis, Isa, Yera, Echwas, Pethro, Elhas, Soilo, Tiwas, Berkano, Echwas, Manas, Lagus, Engwas, Dagas, orthila. All right, everyone. Well, that's all I have for you today. I just wanted to do a short video on rune pronunciation in Proto-Germanic times. So if you have any questions, go ahead and post them below. But I really sincerely hope that this clears up a lot of questions about rune names and pronunciation, particularly for the people who are just kind of interested in runes. There's no reason to really get caught up in the phonetics, you know, the actual like phonetic detail, like I was saying, between aw and o. You know, in my mind, I I made a good impact, a positive impact on you if you are no longer saying orthala and you're now saying orthala, orthala. So anyway, thanks again for watching. Like the video, subscribe, share this video with your friends who are into runes. Let them know that this is actually how you pronounce the names of the runes here. And this is coming from a linguist perspective, right? I'm not just regurgitating information. I can tell you exactly why we reconstruct these rune names the way that we do. So again, this is not arbitrary. I would have been one of the linguists decades ago actually reconstructing these words for us. So anyhow, I hope you all have a great weekend, and I'll talk to you all soon. Take care.